Okay, so good day, everyone. My name is Senor Costa Jr., and I'm a science officer for CCAPS, and I would like to welcome you to the 2020 CLIFF-GRADS webinar. So today, we'll be having a thematic session on rice system. And under the CLIFF-GRADS webinar, thematic sessions, they are designed to provide students the opportunity to clarify their research questions and or research directions with their colleagues with the support of a guest senior research. So the idea of the day is to have a 5-minute introductory presentation about our guest's work, followed by CLIFF-GRADS student presentations. And then at the end, we will be having question and clarifications from students and interaction with our guest. So questions from the audience also can be put in the Q&A box on the bottom of your Zoom screen. So today we are delighted to have the presentation of 7 CLIFF-GRADS students in the presence of Dr. Oli Sender, who is a senior scientist and climate change specialist at the International Rice Research Institute, or IRI. So Oli analyzes greenhouse gas balance of different rice cropping systems in South and Southeast Asia. He also evaluates different mitigation options through water, fertilizer, and crop residue management. Oli also identifies suitable conditions to support dissemination of mitigation technologies such as AWD or alternate wet and drying method. Oli works with different stakeholders in Vietnam, Bangladesh, and the Philippines to foster the implementation of climate smart farming practices. And since 2018, Oli coordinates several IRI research projects in Vietnam in his role as a country representative. So Oli, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being here. And now I pass the floor to you for a presentation. So please.
Thank you. Yeah, so first, sorry for the delay and welcome everybody today. I was asked to chair this student seminar, and I would like to start with a big thank you to CCAPS and the GRA for providing this opportunity to connect, but also to exchange, which we cannot take for granted this year. And also with IRI, we had to delay several of our exchange programs to next year. So very pleased to have this opportunity to exchange, have some exchange with you. Yeah, I was also asked to give a short introduction, which I'm happy to do. And I hope you can see my screen now. Can you? Very good. So yeah, I basically put together a few slides with the basics for Rebecca and for everybody else, so that you in your talks can actually focus on the work you're doing and not so much on the introduction to the topic. So first of all, why do we have a rice session? Well, let me get this. Why do we have a rice session? It's a very important crop. It feeds more than half the world population. It's grown by many smallholder farmers that make up a large percentage of the rural poor population. It uses also a lot of nutrients, but more importantly, irrigation water. So it's a very thirsty crop. And it has a high economic value as well. Then from the emissions point of view, if you look at the table to the bottom right, I estimated the amounts of carbon of CO2 equivalents per kilogram of product. And you see for rice, it's about 2 to 3 kilograms per kilogram of rice, which is of course much lower than beef. Beef has much higher emissions per kilogram of beef, but it is much higher than wheat, for example. And so from the crops, it's one of the highest emitting crops, roughly in the range of poultry. If you look at global emissions, rice makes up about 1.5% of the total global greenhouse gas emissions, which seems little, but if you look at the aviation sector, that's also just a little bit more than 2%. If you look into rice producing countries, that's very different. Rice is a major factor in the national greenhouse gas budgets, for example, here of Southeast Asian countries. It's roughly in the same magnitude as the whole road transportation of different countries. You see in Vietnam, it's a little bit higher than the road transportation. In Indonesia, it's a bit lower, but roughly it's in the same magnitude. There are two major gases that are involved, methane and nitrous oxide. Methane is produced by bacteria under anaerobic soil conditions. So when you have a water layer in the field, these bacteria decompose organic matter and produce methane. And it's the dominant greenhouse gas in flooded fields. Nitrous oxide is a byproduct from nitrification and denitrification processes. You might be aware of this hole in the pipe model, where in various stages of nitrification, denitrification, nitrous oxide is being produced. In flooded fields, it's a minor greenhouse gas. But if we switch to non-continuously flooded conditions, then it can increase in significance. There are various options that how we can reduce emissions. So we estimated that we can reduce field emissions by about 2/3, 65%. You see, we can start with planting varieties that have a shorter growth duration. So the shorter varieties are in the field, the lower are the total emissions. We can change to non-continuously flooded practices, for example, alternate wetting and drying, which has a very high mitigation potential. So basically half of the total reduction that's possible can be achieved with alternate wetting and drying. Then we can have interventions in at post-harvest level, so we can take straw out of the field and not incorporate it into the flooded field. The amount that we incorporate determines strongly the emissions. And then we can also see, can we do the incorporation much earlier before the planting rather than later, which also can reduce the emissions during the growth period. Now, this we can also look not only into the field emissions, but into the total carbon footprint of rice. I show here a sketch of various steps of emissions. You have here the cultivation process on the left, and then you have various other steps: harvest, drying, storage, milling, packaging, and transport and port. And all these steps, of course, also have certain emissions. And more importantly, there are losses that happen during all of these steps. And if you look at that, you can see that you have various options for reducing emissions. In green here are the emissions from the cultivation period, and you see if you apply water-saving technologies, you can basically cut those in half. If you then move to a best practice scenario in the handling and processes, you see that you can not only reduce the emissions during these post-harvest processes, but also the losses or the emissions that are connected to losses when you upgrade to better technologies. I'm not sure if we go into this example. Identifying low emission rice varieties is something that has recently become more the focus of international research. We have seen several studies that have done some meta-analysis and also new field experiments and comparing different cultivars. that may exhibit lower emissions. You see here a relatively old study, 10 years old already, where they compared 10 or so different varieties, and they found differences. But then again, we have to look into the growth duration. You see the cultivar here with the lowest emissions also has the shortest growth duration. So, and you see here the come from very low growth duration varieties. So this is a factor that we, of course, have to look into. There is a field experiment ongoing at the moment. So last dry season and also this coming dry season in Anjiang. And we hope, where we analyze 20 different varieties, and we hope to find some that may have overall. The last slide, we also need to make sure that farmers have an incentive to apply low emission practices. And something that has also over the past couple of years been a topic is carbon credits. I'm not sure if you've read that. 2-3 years ago, Microsoft has bought carbon credits from rice production in, I think, Arkansas. So our question then is, does that also work in smallholder systems? It's very different, of course, from a US production system, but there are solutions that can be tried and that can be explored, and it's definitely something that science can hopefully deliver some answers within the next couple of years. That's my introduction. I don't want to take up any more time, but I'm excited to see your presentations. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Holly, for the great presentation. And again, thanks for being here with us. So now let's go and get started with students' presentation. So Rebecca, could you please add Kuong Ong presentation?
Yes, I will add his pre-recorded video.
Hello everyone, my name is Cường. I come from Vietnam, and my CLIFF-GRADS host organization is International Rice Research Institute Vietnam FIT, and the title of my research is Assessing Consumer Economic Value of Low Emission Rice. The research objectives include to analyze the social demographic characteristics of consumer, to analyze factors affecting consumer choice of rice, to determine consumer reference and the willingness to buy for low emission rice, and to provide the policy recommendation for the strategic development of labeling system for low emission rice in Vietnam. For the methodology, the first objective, I need some variable age, gender, education, and income. The tool I use is descriptive statistics. For the second objective, to analyze the factor affecting consumer choice of rice, I use the 6-level scale to measure price, health, sensory appeal, ethically reduced, natural content, ecological reduction, low emission, and familiarity, and I use the factor analysis for this objective. The last objective is the main objective in this research, to determine the consumer reference and willingness to buy for low emission rice. I need 5 attributes: low emission, eco-friendly, ethically reduced, low glycemic index, and rice. And I use the choice experiment and mixed logic model for this objective. Now I introduce the choice experiment theory. Choice experiment is a form of the choice modeling in which respondents are presented with a series of alternatives and asked to choose the most preferred. Each alternative is characterized by a number of attributes which are offered at the different levels across options. And the stages for choice experiment include selection of attributes, assignment of levels, choice of experimental design, construction of choices, measurement of preference, and estimation procedure. The choice experiments were used to determine the consumer reference and the willingness to buy for environmental, social, and health change for rice. Now I introduce 5 attributes in this study. The first attribute is low emission. The farm rice is certified for low emission, means that it has reduced a carbon footprint, so it is better for a global environment. The second attribute is eco-friendly. It meets strict pesticide regulation and it is better for the local environment. The next attribute is ethically produced. The farm rice is certified for ethical production. It meets safe and fair working conditions. It is better for people producing rice. And the next is the glycemic index. It ensures a slower release of energy, so it keeps blood sugar level more stable. For the attribute health level, non and certification. The last attribute is the price. Is the person above the market price of premium long farm rice and health level 10%, 20%, 40%, and 60%. And the statistical is 20,000 per kilo. It is the example of the choices you can observe in the alternative A. The bucket rice has the low emission and eco-friendly certification, and the price of this bucket is 24,000 per kilo. And the alternative B, the bucket rice has the ethically produced and low glycemic index certification, and the price is 22,000 per kilo. And the statistical, the bucket rice has no certification, and the price is 20,000 per kilo. The consumer can choose the alternative A, alternative B, and the statistical depend on their references. For the research side, data will collected with 300 consumers in Cần Thơ City. The interviewer will invite people to participate at the entrance of the supermarket. The participant had to meet the following criteria: the primary household shopper for rice and consuming rice. Result: to identify the important factors affecting the consumer choice of rice and to determine consumer reference for sustainability and health choice for rice, and to assess the consumer economic value of low emission rice, and to estimate the consumer will need to pay for sustainability and health choice for rice. This study makes a significant contribution to the existing literature on consumer valuation of price attribute, and the result of this study can be used in developing an understanding of the value of food labels to consumer. And this study can robust the added value for rice with attribute relation to environmental, social, and health aspects. Thank you everyone for listening my presentation.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kwong, for your presentation. Really good. So now we're gonna move on to Durba's presentation from Mrs. Durba from India. So Rebecca, please.
Is this visible? Am I visible?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I am Durba, and I'm going to give a presentation on my PhD work, which was titled An Assessment of Carbon Footprint and Water Footprint of Rice and Wheat Crop in Punjab, India. It was basically based on the fact that agri-food sector is one of the sectors which has the largest environmental impact, and it is among the top 3 sectors that has the largest environmental impacts, and it contributes to climate change and global warming. It is also very vulnerable to climate change and global warming. So the study was an attempt to assess the impact of rice and wheat production in terms of both greenhouse gas emissions and water consumption in a particular region in India. The study, since it is based in India, and India is also the 3rd largest GHG emitter by country, and it also is one of the highest, it is one of the countries which has an extremely high water stress condition. While and it consumes 90% of fresh water. So the study was based on a survey which was conducted in Punjab, and Punjab is also called as the granary of India because it is a region which is a very high productivity of rice and wheat, and it contributes the majority of rice and wheat to the central pool of grains in India. The study, so the basic objective was to quantify the carbon footprint of rice and wheat along with hotspot identification. And I also wanted to analyze the variability of the carbon footprint in terms of different farm sizes as well as different agroclimatic zones. So the data was collected accordingly from around 206 rice and 237 wheat farmers. It was The method was an LCA approach, which was based on PAS 2050 guidelines. And along with the carbon footprint, I also analyzed the water footprint of rice and wheat. But since the presentation is based on GHG emissions for rice, I would just concentrate on the previous one. So the results that I got were an emission of 8.8 tons per hectare for rice and 1.2 tons per hectare per ton for rice. Now this is also quite low as compared to Ole's presentation, which he said was 2 to 3 kg per kg, but the values I got was 1.2. This could be because the yield in that region is really high. It is around 7.3 tons per hectare. So that could be one of the reasons that the intensity per ton of rice has come down. Secondly, I found that so rice residue burning was the highest. It has a very major impact and major contribution to the overall GHG emissions from rice production in that region. Even though rice crop residue burning is a banned practice, but it is still happening in certain pockets. And because it is a banned practice, it is not recorded in secondary data. So one has to do survey to know how many farmers are still practicing it. And I also found that regions which are practicing residue burning had a lower literacy rate. So probably certain socioeconomic factors are connected with certain management practices. And I think those roles have to be evaluated. Secondly, methane emissions, they were the third largest emitter. This could be because the emission factors that I used for methane in that region were pretty low. It was lower than, it was around 0.3 kg methane per ton per day, and which was less than the IPCC default factor of 1.3. So, and nitrogen fertilizers were also talking about the farm sizes, I found that large farms, which are greater than 10 hectares, had a lower carbon footprint per ton of rice. While the other factors, while for wheat, farm size did not have any effect. So again, this could be because larger farms, they have a higher efficiency, higher efficient management practices, which is because of which their yields are higher, and which is why the carbon footprint per ton has come out to be lower in those areas. The third important, and this is a very important thing that I found, was that, so I did the water footprint, as Ole mentioned, that rice is also a very high water consuming crop. So I estimated the water footprint using a software, Cropper Estimate. So I found it to be 1,097 liters per kg in that region, but this was actually pretty low compared to the actual irrigation water use. Now, since this study was a survey-based study, and I had the data for energy which was being used for irrigation, I found that the data for that does not correlate. So about the takeaway messages, nitrogen fertilizer use was found to be the greatest hotspot in the region. Along with that, I would also like to add that there is also a need for, even though we talk about increase in yields to attain sustainability, but I think there should be a benchmark on how much inputs should be put into the crop production. And I think those benchmarks should be also defined regionally. Secondly, I found that geoclimatic factors do not majorly affect the carbon footprint variation, but management practices do. Management practices like residue burning or how much of fertilizers are being added. And management practices could really depend on socioeconomic factors. Third most important thing that I found was that the government role is very crucial in mitigation, because in that region, 100% of electricity was subsidized, which was leading to water table decline in that region also, because people were getting free electricity and they were using it for irrigating their fields, and which was leading to higher GHG emissions, because if the water table is declining, you need more energy to pump out water from the same depth. Secondly, in that region, or in all over India, actually, not only in India, in many regions of the world, we get input subsidies for fertilizers or energy. But I think those, instead of now is the time that we should divert those subsidies to incentivize the adoption. Since Ole also mentioned that it is very important to incentivize the crop production practices. Otherwise, farmers won't adopt certain practices. And so this was from my end. Thank you.
Hi, Drupal. Thank you so much for the great presentation. It's amazing to see your work, what you have done in India.
Yeah,
So thank you
you.
so much. Thanks. And save your questions in interaction wishes to with Oli to the end of the all the 7 presentations, right? Thank you so much again. So let's move on to Glory Edwards from Nigeria, please.
Okay, I'm Glory Edwards. You can hear me? Good. All right. So my overall PhD thesis is on sustainability in rice systems, and for my CLIFF-GRADS project, I'm working on the greenhouse gas emission potential of sustainable rice platform SRP practices for sustainable rice cultivation at IRI, Vietnam, where Ole is one of my supervisors. So the SRP is a sustainable production standard, and it brings together all 3 dimensions of sustainability: the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of sustainability in rice systems. It's not only focusing on the environmental aspects such as greenhouse gas emission, which is our focus, but it also encompasses the social, the economic dimensions of rice production. But for this project, our goal is greenhouse gas emissions quantification and looking at the greenhouse gas emission potential of the SRP. So how much greenhouse gas emissions are being saved by people practicing the SRP, the standard of the SRP, people using the standard of the SRP. It's also a certification platform. It's a multi-stakeholder alliance, and several companies have already started adopting the SRP as for their certification. As you can see here on Olam rice, we see the SRP rice and the SRP logo. So it's to kind of incentivize people to adopt sustainable practices and also promotes rice that has been grown sustainably. So for the emissions calculation, we know that the simple equation is an emission factor multiplied by activity data, and which also includes the cultivation period of rice, the number of hectares being under cultivation. But this activity data really varies under different ecosystem, water regimes, organic amendment. Even when the period you apply the organic amendment, the inorganic fertilizer use, the type and amount, so many variations. As Ole also stated, the rice cultivar also matters, soil type, and a lot of variations. But for this project, I'll be looking at the SRP and actually focusing the activity data based on what the SRP proposes. So for the SRP, there are 46 indicators in 8 areas, and for this in 8 areas, and for these 46 indicators, for these different areas, we find the ones that directly contribute to greenhouse gas emission: land conversion and biodiversity, water management, nutrient management, organic fertilizer choice, inorganic fertilizer choice, drying technique, and also rice straw and rice tuple management. Then we also have 12 performance indicators for the SRP, of which performance indicator 8 is the greenhouse gas emissions. And under this, we have both the intermediate and we have the advanced and basic levels of compliance. And for the greenhouse gas emissions, it actually includes water management, which is a different performance indicator, and it includes nutrient management and end management, which is also a different performance indicator. So I'll be using the IPCC database to look for because I'm creating a calculation tool. So I'm looking at using the IPCC as the standard, but there are several other indicators that are not included in the IPCC right now, and research is ongoing on these indicators, such as rice cultivar. So this is an example of a calculation table that we can use. And we not only have emission factors, we also have scaling factors, which vary based on region, based on so many different indicators here and there. So I would like to also state that while there's a default methane baseline emission factor for continuously flooded fields or for upland fields where there's no flooding at all, this actually varies per region, and we can see it varying per region. And while this one focuses on the continent, says the region as per continent, some of them give us the region as per the climate. So we have like tropical mountain and all of that. So we are seeing so many variations and differences, and how we can use this to create a global tool. So on the upper left, you can see this is from the SRP standard, and we can see irrigated production system flood prone, irrigated production system not flood prone. But on the lower right hand side, you can see the IPCC table that is given, and we can see how it's defined for irrigated continuously flooded single drainage period or multiple drainage period. So my task now is ensuring that this I find the emission factors from the IPCC or from other scientific research that align with that of the SRP, in order to be able to quantify greenhouse gas emissions that are being saved by using the SRP practices. So thank you very much. Yeah.
That's great, Glory. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's amazing. It's amazing to see this working, coming through. Thank you. So next would be Primitiva Andrea from Tanzania. So Primitiva, please.
Okay. Welcome everybody to my PhD research talk. I'm Primitiva Andrea from Tanzania, and my PhD title is on evaluation of water management and the crop establishment practices on water productivity, nutrients uptake, and the rice quality in Eastern Tanzania. Yeah, the general overview. Okay. Yeah, rice production must double by 2050 to keep the pace with the global population growth, and this target is even more challenging given the impact of climate change on water availability and the drive to reduce fertilizers inputs to make agriculture become more environmentally sustainable. And it is expected that by 2050, several million hectares of current lowland irrigated rice systems will experience water scarcity, and it is a further critical issue in lowland rice systems. And this is to the factor that there is establishment of ideal conditions that lead to the emission of methane. So it follows that the development of water saving technicals and the crop establishment methods are very essential technicals to improve the sustainability of irrigated rice systems. And the among water saving technical is the alternate wetting and the drying. And this has been developed by International Rice Research Institute and is becoming increasingly widespread, especially in Asia. But in Africa, where I'm based, this is being practiced by a few farmers, so there's the need to continue doing more researches in different agroecological zones so that farmers, they can adopt this system of this water management practice. And another crop establishment methods that is going to be employed in my research is the system of rice intensification against conventional methods. And the general objective of my research is to evaluate the impact of water management strategies and the crop establishment methods on water productivity, plant nutrient uptake, and the rice quality. And the specific objective is to evaluate the effect of water net wetting in a drying, as well as continuous flooding on water productivity, water use, water savings, as well as grain yield, and to assess the rice agronomic responses under the system of rice intensification and the convention of flooded rice management, and to assess the effect of water management and the cultivation methods on nutrient uptake as well as rice quality. The fourth is to evaluate the impact of water management strategies and the crop establishment methods on soil properties. This research has been conducted in 2 sites. The first one is in Mkindo, located in Eastern Tanzania. This is a farmer managed irrigation scheme. The second one was the 2 screen pot experiments that were carried at the Department of Soil Science at Sokoine University, where I'm based. And we conducted 2 wet and dry season experiments that was consecutive, conducted in 2019-2020, and the experiment was run under randomized split plot design. And this experiment aimed at evaluating the crop establishment methods, that are system of rice intensification and the conventional methods, to see the effect on growth and yield parameters of rice. We recorded many of them. These are the experimental treatments that combined system of rice intensification and other different nitrogen rates, as well as conventional practices that farmers are being practicing. Then this research plots were maintained up to maturity, and the standard procedure were followed to manage the experiment until we harvested the crop. These are some formulas that has been used to calculate yield. And the third and fourth experiment involved experimental pot experiments that were conducted in 2019, and it aimed to evaluate the effect of alternate wetting and drying under 6 nitrogen fertilizers to see the effect on water productivity, water use, and the water savings. And these are the depth or the level that adopted in the pot experiments to maintain the water irrigation. Yeah, data analysis, both trials, field and the pot experiment, were run under statistical tools, that is GenStat, and ANOVA were used to compare if there is the differences on the means and a 5% probability level. And we have a few results, some due to time, some as projected in my screen. And we have seen that under the system of rice intensification, where farmers plant one crop and a spacing of 25 by 25 centimeter and alternate water, it is performed better compared to convention in both wet and dry season. And we can see even other in straw yield, and there were no different in harvest index. And yeah, this is the photo showing the experiment and the pot experiment, and the water use and the pot experiment. Yeah, and alternate wetting, the water use were not much different. So in case of water management, we didn't save much, but we saved under the interaction, we saved up to 34.3%. And alternate wetting and drying, we improved the water productivity, that's 1.2, but the difference were not significant, but the significance can be seen under the different nitrogen levels, and they were increasing as we increased the level of nitrogen. And this is for the upland trial. And the objective 3 and 4 is ongoing laboratory work, where we are determining the rice quality, nutrient uptake, and the post-harvest soil characteristics. So we are going to see the effect of water management, that is alternate wetting and drying, and the effects of crop establishment methods, that is conventional practices, and the system of rice intensification, the way they affect nutrient quality, if there are effect on nutrient uptake, if there are new effect on the soil properties. So we are going to see those. And the takeaway message, this is the end of my presentation. The takeaway message is that water scarcity is likely to become a more significant problem around the globe. So adopting cultivation practices such as one that use less water is the way forward. So a small portion of water saved from rice planting areas can produce huge societal and environmental benefits if the water is used for higher value uses. So it is particularly vital to establish water saving techniques in rice farming system. This is the end of my presentation. That is Primitiva in the field. Thank you very much.
Thanks you, Primitiva, for the great presentation. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So move on. Next in line is Mr. Sani Idris from Nigeria. So please.
The chairperson of this session, my dear colleagues, good day. My name is Sani Idris from Nigeria. I'm going to be hosted by the Universidad Nacional del Centro de la Provincia de Buenos Aires, Argentina. My 50 research topic is entitled Evaluating the Effect of Superabsorbent Polymer and Deficit Irrigation on Rice Growth and Yield Response Factors, Soil Productivity and Greenhouse Gas Emission in Rice Savannah, Nigeria. By way of introduction, the test crop rice is the second most important crop after corn in terms of importance, as it is being used by over half of the world population as a staple crop. Nigeria is the largest producer as well as the largest consumer of rice. However, the current production system or practice is not sustainable, especially in the face of high population explosion as well as climatic uncertainties, especially with current government interventions and policies that seeks to improve rice production intensification. Because of this, presence of water unavailability, especially looking at the fact that the area is characterized by limited water supply, frequent drought, low soil fertility, and high sensitivity to land degradation, coupled with other consequences that are associated with the hitherto production practices, there is urgent need to shift ground to more robust, climate resilient, and environmentally friendly farming technologies, such as deficit irrigation and the use of superabsorbent polymer, which were found promising in terms of rice production in other parts of the world. That therefore motivated this study and gave us to the following objective: to determine the effect of the three individual factors, the deficit irrigation, the superabsorbent polymer, and the barrel rate of nitrogen, on soil productivity, rice growth, and yield response factors, water status at various functions, water use efficiency and nitrogen use efficiency, as well as greenhouse gas emission. You can see this present the climatic variables of the area, of the research area, as well as the tree treatment. The deficit irrigation is, at 3 levels, while the south is at 4 level, and the nitrogen rate is also at 4 level, as you can clearly see. We adopted randomized complete block design in order to control the, to block the source of errors which we cannot control in the field. And we impose this for treatment, in such kind of layout known as split arrangement in order to accommodate all the 3 factors. And this diagrammatically represents single replicate of the, full irrigation scheme, which is DI-100. And you can see at the subplot level, you have 4 rate of superabsorbent polymer, and at the subplot level, you have 4 rate of the fertilizer, rates. During the full establishment of the rice field, we carried out standard pre-planting and operations such as harrowing, labeling and puddling for rice product, good rice, growth and development. And we earmarked the standard layout as it was designed in our research. In terms of the establishment profile, we followed, some SRI practices, which is system of rice intensification. In such regard, we used 12-day-old seedlings for the transplanting, which were transplanted at a rate of 1 seedling per hill, and we maintained 25 by 25 centimeter spacing using calibrated marker, as you can see in figure 4. We already raised our seedling, as you can see them, after which we now transplanted them for the full establishment of our rice field. Basically, we used two samples to have our data. The first soil sample, which we used to determine soil productivity parameters and to measure greenhouse gases, as well as black sample, which we used to determine gross parameters and yield parameters as well. All samples were subjected to standard laboratory analysis where necessary and subsequently subjected to statistical analysis, basically ANOVA and repeated major ANOVA in case of the greenhouse gas emission, because time was a factor then. This is an ongoing research, and we are now on the peak of data extraction and interpretation. We look forward to your contribution. Thank you once again. I am Sani Idris.
Thanks, Sani, for the recording. Great presentation. And now let's move on to Shutri.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shruti, a PhD scholar from India. The CLIFF-GRADS host organization is IRTA Marine Continental Water Programs in Spain. They collaborated on the project Post-Harvest Management in Rice Paddy Field for Carbon Budget Optimization under Dr. Nate Martis Exact. My PhD title is The Application of Crop Simulation Models for Water and Nutrient Management on Growth and Productivity of Rice under Different Climatic Scenarios under the guidance of Dr. U. Surendran. The general overview of objectives. Rice is the most staple food, and any reduction in productivity of rice and its effects are very crucial and needs to pay attention on how climatic changes affects plant growth and its development. Most attempts to quantify the agronomic and financial benefits of droughts and nutrient stress have been focused on arid and semi-arid environments where water availability is becoming increasingly unreliable and expensive. And also, we all know that rice fields contribute approximately 9 to 13% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and methane and nitrous oxides are the dominant greenhouse gases. Hence, I would like to study about the quantification, reduction and mitigation measures of methane effectively. The research objectives and methodology. The first research objective is to quantify the impact of water, soil and weather on changes in crop parameters with the help of biochemical analysis, and then to establish nutrient and water recommendation for crops by conducting different field experiments and with the help of crop simulation models. Then to understand the different straw management strategies on crop soil on the carbon budget with the help of applied sciences and bioinformatic tools. Then to measurement and mitigation of agriculture greenhouse emission with greenhouse gas sampling methods. The expected results and relevance of the study is the calibrated and validated model, then the productivity improvement and yield gap assessment, then quantify quantity of water and irrigation and scheduling and the nutrient management, then optimization of carbon budget, then increasing carbon sequestration and carbon shortage in agriculture system, then reduction of agriculture greenhouse gas emission. The research site. The host institution, the experiment will be conducted at the institution of IRTA Marine and Continental Water Program in Spain. The site is located on IRTA San Carlos de La Ractia in Tarragona, and my home institution where my PhD work will be continued at the is CWRD Kunamangalam, the site located in Kozhikode, Kerala in India. The conclusions. The calibrated and validated crop simulation model will help in identifying the best management strategies to maximize the production in a sustainable way, and the study will allow the assessment of the impact of SRL on greenhouse gas emissions. Then it will provide advanced mitigation and adaptive strategies in post-harvest rice seasons, and the outcome of this work will provide specific guidelines for climate change mitigation and adaptation and new knowledge on underlying microbial processing. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Shutri, for the recording. It's really great to hear from you and see your research. So next and final presentation from Mr. Wood from Ethiopia. So Rebecca, please.
Greeting to all of our CLIFF-GRADS project members and attendees. My name is Tarino Gabramad. My CLIFF-GRADS host organization is International Rice Research Institute, Manila, Philippines. Do not confuse. Initially, the project was assigned me at International Rice Research Institute, Vietnam. However, when we discussed with Dr. Ole, he informed me that the experiment to be conducted at Philippines, and I agreed with him to work there. My PhD research title is Modeling Greenhouse Gas Emission from Rice Production System under different water and crop management in the northern part of Ethiopia. When I come to the general overview, rice is the most important cereal crop and the essential food source for more than half of the world population. And rice production in Ethiopia was started since 1917s, and the country has reasonable potential to grow various rice types, mainly in rainfed lowland, upland, and irrigated ecosystem, which can be stated under Mulugeta and Heluf research in 2014. Rice production is one of the major source of greenhouse gas emission, like methane and nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide, which can be contribute to the global climate change. The global warming potential of methane and nitrous oxide, which can be released by rice production, is 28 and 265 times higher than that of carbon dioxide, respectively, on 100-time horizon, which can be stated by Mahiri et al. In 2013. The greenhouse gas such as methane and nitrous oxide in rice farms depends on different factors, like such as soil organic matter, which means the soil management system, land use, crop intensity, irrigation water, and drainage management practice, etc. These are the major factors which can be increasing or reducing the methane and the nitrous oxide emission. Rather than considering the greenhouse gas emission and water saving strategy, special technology practices should be developed to increase the productivity of rices. So when come to the second point, objective, method, and expected result have been stated under this table. My first objective is to study the effect of crop and water management on rice yield and yield components. Under this objective, the methods will be just first. The method is the experiment will be implemented by applying a recommended rate of farmyard manure and straw mulching. Another treatment is found here, the control treatment, which does not have farmyard manure and straw mulching. And the second one is the water management experiment. Under the water management experiment, we use continuous flooding and alternate wet drying method will be used. The last one is the last method under this objective is all the required crop data will be collected to identify the crop yield and the yield components. What will be the expected result under this objective? The first, the most important expected result is we will expect a significant enhancement of yield and the yield component of the crop under this objective will be expected. The second objective will be to evaluate the effect of crop and water management on methane, and nitrous oxide emission. Under this objective, the method is a closed chamber will be used to collect the greenhouse gas emission. And the second one is the NDC model will be used to evaluate the greenhouse gas emission as a model. And what will be the expected result under this objective? We will expect to mitigate the greenhouse gas emission or to reduce the greenhouse gas emission among the treatments. So the third objective is to evaluate the influence of planting method on yield and the greenhouse gas emission of rice-based farming system. Under this objective, the method is direct planting and transplanting method will be used to evaluate this objective. And what will be the expected result? The expected result will be improve the yield of the crop and mitigate the greenhouse gas emission will be expected under this objective. The last objective is to assess the current significance of smallholder farmers' crop management technology on greenhouse gas emission and yield of the crop, which means here the preliminary assessment before I'm going to the field experiment. What are the methods? The primary data will be collected through the structure questionnaire, and the expected result will be the initial input could be collected under the farmer fields which is related to the project, which mean the crop and water management, which can be related with the greenhouse gas emission and yields. Okay, when I come to the third and last conclusion one, my research project will have the most important point. It will anticipate a significant opportunity to improve yield and yield components of the crop. The second conclusion is my research will promote the participation of the local farmer as well as a large scale farmer to mitigate climate change. Thank you very much. This is my last session. I'm running to finish my PowerPoint within 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wood, for the recording. It's great also to see your presentation. Thank you so much all for all 7 presentations. They were great. So now let's open up the floor for a few minutes of discussion. We have 25 minutes left, so let's take advantage of this moment. So I would like to pass the floor to Oli. So Oli, what is your reactions about these research? Could you please give us a few words on the students' presentations before we get started?
Yes, well, I have listened to all the presentations. For half a presentation, I dropped out again. First of all, I would like to thank everybody who presented today. I think this is a great level of presentations. We also saw a wide range of different topics, all within the topic and the overarching topic of greenhouse gas emissions from rice. And we see how many smaller aspects there are, all important, and lots of research questions still remaining, although this area of research has been conducted since the 1980s. So there is, I'm very happy to see also that some students were already able to collect results, whereas others could only present an outline so far. So I have noted down a list of questions, but I would also encourage the students to ask questions to each other. So is there anything first that someone would like to ask someone else? Was there anything unclear?
And please just unmute yourself and make the question, please.
Hi, Siniro, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I have a question for the first presentation. Is it from Huang? I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. It's about the survey of rice consumer in Vietnam. I would like to know why do you choose supermarket as a place to find the respondents for the survey? Is it the main channel of the rice distribution in Vietnam, or is there any other reason like convenience or any other consideration? Thank you. I also have another questions for Durba. Should I say it now or later?
Yes, please go ahead and post the other question as well, and then we'll ask the two to reply.
Okay, thanks, Ola. For Durba, I like the presentation, and I would like to ask more about the conclusion. So when you said about the benchmark for regionality, do you have any idea how do you define the benchmark in respect with the regionality about the input use? And also, if we think about the relationship between socio-economic factors with management practices, did you observe what kind of the factors in terms of socio-economic factors that related to the decision in management of rice practices? Thank you.
Just unmute yourself and reply, Titis, please.
Hello, Titis. Thank you for your questions. The first question was about the benchmark for regionality. Well, the study did not, the objective was not that, but the conclusion was that we should have benchmarks. Now, how do we define it? I think it should be defined according to the yields. For example, each different region would have a different level of yield. So right now what is happening is that just to increase the yields, farmers are increasing the use of fertilizer because they think that that's a linear relationship. But in my study, I found that there is a weak correlation between the yield and the nitrogen fertilizer use. Perhaps because plants uptake efficiency of nitrogen use is also decreasing day by day, and also that the soil fertility is decreasing. So with regard to that, I think experiments should be conducted so that we know we have a particular benchmark of yield that, okay, we are going to have this much yield for this is fine for this region, and we are going to have this much input for this much yield. And we should not go about increasing the amount of input. Even in terms of water, I think there should be a certain benchmark now, because now our focus should be on sustainability. Initially, it was on increasing just the production. And even for that matter, I think when we talk about GHG emissions in terms of kg per unit ton of the product, or I think even that we did not account for per hectare. So per unit ton of the product is a much more used norm, but I think even that needs to change, because when we neglect the per hectare emissions, we also neglect the actual intensity of emissions that is happening, because again the debate again revolves around the yield factor. So I think that's a debate there, and I think there should be some work on this. Second thing, you asked about the socio-economic factors and management practices. In my study region, yes, I did observe this thing. So basically in the study region, the crop residue burning practice, particularly for rice, was banned. Now because rice residues are not used by the cattle as a fodder, so they burn it off. And this is also prevalent because of mechanization, a lot of rice straw remains on the field. So they burn it off now, and I have observed that this practice is more prevalent in areas which are more backward in terms of economic development. Also, when I talked about in terms of the literacy rate, those areas are backward. I don't know, in certain other areas, this practice is very well regulated and there are checks on the ban. But also, I think practice of certain management practices is also a factor of peer pressure or what your peer group is doing. So if certain farmers in a group or in an area, they don't care about the rules, they just do it. And if there's no check also, then they will continue doing this. And this also affect on how educated they are or how aware they are. So I think awareness building is a very important thing when we talk about mitigation. Because whatever research we are doing at the scientific level, at this level, I think if it is not, if it not consider the ground level situation, then it is kind of useless. Because then it is either not getting implemented with the policy, or people are not getting aware of it and not changing their practices. Even when you talk about incentivizing certain practices, so there should be a particular incentive. Economic incentive is very important. So when we talk about AWD or SRP practices for rice growing in these regions, people practice continuous flooding systems because they think that it is it prevents the growth of weed also, and also because water is free. So certain practices are also done because there is it is easy for them to do that, because water is free for them, energy is free for them, so they keep doing it. So at a policy level, changes are needed. So, I hope I answered your question to this.
Yes, Durba, thank you.
Okay, come.
Kwong, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hello. Because she asked me the question about I collect the data in the supermarkets. The reason is that because the research is the certified for low emission rice. It is in the packet rice. That's why if the Vietnamese consumer want to buy the packet rice, they have to go to the supermarket to buy the rice. That's why we choose the supermarkets. Because if we collect the data in the wet market or open market, usually the consumer, they buy it in the loose rice, not in the packet rice. That's why in the habit of the Vietnamese consumer, if they want to the packet rice, they usually go to the supermarket. It is the reason why we collect the data in the supermarket. And also we have some criteria for the consumer. It is the primary household shopper for rice and also consuming rice. And I think my research is also interesting for the labeling. The labeling for rice, for example, is the low emission, the eco-friendly, the ethically produced, and the low glycemic index. That's why we can contribute for the labeling system of rice. It is my answer for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the good questions and also for providing the answers. May I quickly add maybe, for the market study with Kuang, we also, of course, target a certain segment of consumers. So we're targeting urban middle class consumers. So that's why we went for a supermarket study. I would also like to just highlight what Durba said regarding change of practices. It is, of course, important that farmers have alternatives. So, and these alternatives have to be economically valid. So we need to maybe focus more on win-win situations that may not translate into the largest benefits we can expect, but at least into some positive benefits. Are there other questions? Other questions? If please just unmute yourself if you have any. Otherwise, I will start with an additional question for Kuang. Sorry? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the presentation. Are you getting me? Thank you for the presentation. I have a question for Durba. Yeah, she was talking about burning practices, and she said that it was banned in India. I would like, first of all, to know why it was banned and what was the consequences of these practices before and after it was banned in the yield, rice yield productivity and greenhouse gas emission. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Nelly. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'll go ahead and answer that. So yes, about the crop residue burning practices, so if I start from the starting, around 1960s, 1970s, that region actually did not traditionally grow rice. It came around with the advent of Green Revolution that they started to grow rice. And initially it was done manually, so there were not much residues, but as mechanization took place, as combined harvesters came into the picture, there were residues which were getting a large amount of residues were generated, and farmers, because they used to sow wheat just within 1 or 2 weeks of the harvest of rice, so there was not much time, and to save time, to save the labor cost, they used to burn it off. Now, why was it banned? It was banned because actually Punjab is very close to the capital of India, which is Delhi. So in that time when they used to burn in around October or starting of November, because winters, that is the time of winters, and due to the certain wind directions, what used to happen was that the smoke from the farms, it used to like envelop the entire area, and Delhi used to have a very thick haze in that duration, and this became a very important environmental concern because it was the capital. So actually the haze, it's still, even I faced it till last year, but it is so strong that you cannot, it feels like suffocating, you cannot breathe properly for 2 to 3 days. So and the blame went to the farmers of Punjab and Haryana who used to burn the rice residues. So it was banned by the National Green Tribunal of India, and it has been a few years since it has been banned, but still it is being practiced. So this is what you asked. Is there anything you want to ask? I hope I was able to answer.
I think you answered that very well.
Thank you.
You answered basically the first part of my question. And the second part, you answered the first part of my question, and the second part was what are the consequences of these?
Okay, with the ban,
rice yield productivity and greenhouse.
Okay, so I did not actually quantify the before and after situation of ban, but I can tell you that so with the ban, what happened was that the regional extension centers got active, and because there is a fine when you're caught burning the crop residues, so a lot of farmers, they started to reduce it, and they started to absolutely stop this practice, because there were a lot of workshops which was going around that region, and farmers were asked not to do that. But also what happened was that the Agriculture University came out with an implement which is called as a happy seeder, which seeds the rice residue with the wheat. So it is a kind of a zero tillage implement, and the rice residue seeded along with wheat. So and now they are also promoting this implement. So that is also one of the consequences that has come out. So it saves a lot of diesel. Like for example, when wheat is tilled, I think in that region it consumes around 30 to 40 liters of diesel per acre. But with the happy seeder technology, it has come down to 5 to 7 liters of diesel. So using that, now that implement is used to kind of not incorporate the rice residues. Now this is another consequence, that now nitrous oxide emissions are going to increase from the wheat cultivation, because nitrous oxide relies on residues, organic matter in the soil. And so it is very important that in wheat we have to like limit the fertilizer use, because otherwise it's going to be a lot of nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. So I think now this condition is also going to come about. Is that okay, Nelly?
Yeah, thank you. It is okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe I can add to that the burning of crop residues has been banned in many countries, I would say in most countries, generally due to health concerns. It has also not helped in many countries to just ban it. It's really where we see decreases, there are really other options. So the price of straw has, for example, increased because there is another purpose for the straw. In the Philippines, we saw also a strong decrease from burning, but it shifted into incorporation of the straw into flooded fields. So instead of smoke, the methane emissions have gone up. So there are various pros and cons, and always some trade-offs. Other questions, please?
Yeah, we have one in the chat box. If I may, I can read it out. So it says, to the last presenter, may the presenter explain the reliability of structured questionnaires in assessing effect of current practice on GHG emissions? So it should be direct though to Mr. Wood. Is Mr. Wood here to answer this question? No, it doesn't seem.
I think he might have dropped out of the call. It looks like he's not here as far as I can see.
It seems so, yeah, but it was also, it's a good comment. We have to be very careful with our wording and our phrasing of what we're doing and also about the results. So I saw that in the presentation, a result was a reduction in practices, which of course is not the case from such a research study, but a hypothesis from an experiment is that if you apply certain practices, that then emissions will be reduced. So that was also one of the points that I had noted down here. Other questions, please? I have one comment and one question for Sruti. In your introduction, you said rice contributes 9 to 13% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's not correct. It contributes 9 to 13% of global agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. That's an important, important difference, and that we often see these numbers being mixed up. My question is, which tools or models are you going to use?
Hello, sir. Good evening. I'm using DSAT as a model for assessing the nutrient and water management for rice production.
And does that also quantify emissions?
No, sir. Actually, it won't quantify the emission. That quantifying emission part will be conducting in the Spain program, that CLIFF-GRADS program, and they will suggest me the model which they will be using. That we haven't yet discussed actually.
Understood. Okay. Anyway, I have two more comments here. One is for Kuang. So you presented these different labels. How many combinations of these labels did you have? So maybe that also was not quite clear, that you have various combinations of these 4 labels. And I know you've just completed the study, but from your observation, can you share any initial results, for example? Which of the labels do you think were particularly important to increase the price?
Hello. You listen me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because for the choice experiment, we have the 5 attributes. It is the low emission. It is represent for the global environment. And the second attribute I have, it is the eco-friendly. It is represent for the local environment. And the third attribute is the ethically produced. It is safe and fair working condition for people producing rice. And the next attribute I have is the low glycemic index. It ensures a slower release of energy, so it keeps blood sugar level more stable. And for example, I have for lock Midas, I have the 16 choices, and every consumer can choose lock 0, lock 1, lock 2, or lock 3, and every consumer can answer 4 choices. And that's why we can every consumer will answer 4 choices. It combine up the different label and the price. And when I just finished collecting the data last Sunday, and when we collecting the data, I observe the consumer. Some consumer, they focus on about the health attribute. That's why if they refer the low glycemic index, they will choose the answer, the health glycemic index. And the other consumer, if they like the low emission or they like the environment, they will choose it. And also the price is also the sensitive. That's why they consider the bucket rate. If the bucket rate is higher, maybe they will choose the static code. Mean that the static code it is the bucket rate hay no label. And that's why I think it is the heterogeneous consumer. From this research, we can observe that the heterogeneous.
That's interesting. Thanks for sharing these observations, and we're excited to see the data soon.
Yes.
My last point is towards Durba. So you said you observed rather low greenhouse gas emissions in your study, and that's very typical. We know that in India, the emissions are generally a little lower as compared to, for example, Southeast Asia. That's one point is the soil, which is maybe a little less clay, and also the cropping system, which often is not a pure rice monocrop, but a rice wheat system. Both of that reduces the emissions generally. So I'm not surprised that you found relatively low emissions. There are new IPCC guidelines from 2019. There was a refinement of the guidelines. I would encourage everybody to look for the new guidelines. They have new emission factors, new scaling factors, and they will be used in the future. Then the water use that you found, 1,000 liters per kilogram, is indeed very low, and this is very surprising. Usually in continuously flooded systems, we find 2,000, 3,000 liters per kilogram. I've seen studies with 6,000 and 8,000 liters per kilogram. So that's indeed very low. And I would, I would check what did you exactly measure, and are there any other water sources? That I would look into that. People would question, why is that so low? And my last point is the emissions from burning. You said that is a significant factor in the total emissions. Now, the greenhouse gas from burning is mostly CO2. We have a little bit of methane and we have a little bit of black carbon, but mostly what is emitted is CO2. Now, the CO2 has been taken from the atmosphere before during plant growth. It grows with CO2. So the CO2 that is released during burning is a net zero emission because it just has been taken up. Therefore, we usually don't consider CO2 emissions, especially from agricultural burning, as greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture. So I would look into the factors that you're using in your assessment and probably check if there's a way that you can disaggregate the burning emissions by different gases.
Thank you so much, Ole, for your comments. First of all, yes, about the water use, yes, I did find it out to be very low because, and this was done using a Cropwood software, that is the FAO Cropwood software, which estimates the theoretical water use. But in actuality, I found it to be very high. But I did not compute it because I only proposed this as a method to how to, I had the energy, I had the estimates of the energy that the farmers were using for groundwater irrigation, and using that, how could we estimate the volume of water? That method was not established till now, but we have sent a paper which proposes the methodology. So that because usually water footprint measurements, the Cropwood method is used and the theoretical estimates are used, but they are so wrong that if they go into policy, you will definitely get wrong policies. So it is very important that using survey-based method, particularly for flood irrigated areas, that we should do estimations of water use. Secondly, about the burning, yes, I did get this point from one of the reviewers when I sent the paper. And also, I did also check the IPCC guidelines. It said that CO2 is to be excluded. But I have this major question, which is why I did not disaggregate it, that when we are estimate, so basically the entire premise of global warming is based on the concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And so why should we, and it is very
now
dynamic.
It seems
Plants
I have dropped out. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Durba. Can you wrap up, please? We are over time, almost 10 minutes.
Okay, so maybe I'll just ask this thing later. I had this question for Ole.
Yeah, and I think I would really encourage you to send him this question over email.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have any questions, I'm sure you can send them through to the CLIFF-GRADS email address, and we can connect you with Ole and figure all of that out.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, so it's unfortunately we need to wrap up. So thank you everyone for being here again. Thanks for all the students, all the presentations. They were great. We have had a great discussion today, and a special thank to Oli for taking the time to be here with us today. And we see each other soon by next week. So I wish you all a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Oli. Thank you so much for being here again. Great presentation. Thanks.
Pleasure. I'm sorry that I dropped out, I don't know, 2 or 3 times now.
No, it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
And it's good. And Oli, I have a quick question to you. So regarding you showed that there are short growing varieties that reduce emissions because the flooding is shortened, right? Yeah. But these short growing varieties, do they use more or less fertilizer overall in terms of quantity? Yeah.
I don't think they need more. So what you will find in studies is often that it shows more, but just because the long duration varieties usually grow in systems where you have only lower inputs per se. So you don't need necessarily more inputs for short duration varieties. What is important, and I think there was also a question around that, is the timing of fertilization. So if you apply too much fertilizer only at the start, for example, you find very high nitrous oxide emissions and the plant doesn't take up all the nutrients that it needs to. If you schedule that better, then it's of course a more efficient use of your
that's great. Okay, thanks, Oli. And good to see you again. And Rebecca, thank you so much for managing all this Zoom stuff. Thank you all. Thanks, Oli. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a good day, Siniro.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Good evening, Rebecca.